Greetings from planet Seattle. This is Electric Elohim's page, and I am coming to you to re-follow up on the last video that I did. It was called The True Revealing of the Beast, the Antichrist, the Kingdom Coming, in the book of Daniel chapter 7, and in that I talked about the Illuminati, I talked about the fallen angels, I talked about Israel, I talked about the Khazars and the Ashkenazim. So I wanted to today talk about Moses and Abraham's second wife, Israel, the lost tribes. So one of the things that I think that the Lord is leading true Messianic Jews, and if you call yourself Christian, the revealing of the color of the actual Israelites, the lost tribes, and what happened to Moses, and piecing things together, and Abraham's wife, and the 6 sons that he had with KETURAH. Here we go. So this is what the Lord told me. Moses fled from Upper Egypt, which is now modern-day South Egypt, into the desert of Saudi Arabia, then into Ethiopia, where he met the high priest of Midian in Ethiopia, which was Jethro, or his Jewish name was Reuel, in which he ended up Moses marrying Zipporah. In the book of Numbers, chapter 12, verse 1, it tells you that Midian is an Ethiopian tribe. Now, the next thing, Miriam and Aaron, a lot of people twist scripture to say that Miriam and Aaron were angry about Zipporah because she was Ethiopian. That doesn't make any sense. What it is she was not a Semitic Jew. And if you read in the book of Exodus, the book of Leviticus, when God is giving them the commandments, the first thing he commanded was there were foreigners amongst them when they came out of Egypt, when God delivered them out of Egypt, and there were foreigners amongst them. So these foreigners in the word were required. God, the first thing when he gave all the commandments was they needed to be circumcised. They needed to accept the Judaism at that time, the ways and the statutes and the commands which God put forth to Moses. And so Aaron and Miriam were struck with leprosy because they were mocking and disrespecting Moses. And it says in the word that in all the land, Moses was the most humble man that God had, that he could find in the land. He was the most humble person. And Moses being Moses, he prayed on the behalf of Miriam and Aaron were forgiven. Isn't it ironic that even after this sin, Aaron's sons were consecrated and set aside as Levites, as well as one of Moses' descendants as well? So if you read Numbers 12:1, Midian is in Ethiopia. You have people that try to twist things. Usually it's Americans and the white Americans and white Europeans, and the Khazars and the Ashkenazim Jews that try to twist the Bible. They try to tell you things that, the Egyptians were white. But okay, if you ask a real Egyptian, they will tell you that they are colored. They are not white. So then we move forward, and again, people, dismiss, Abraham's second wife, KETURAH. The modern day Israeli government refuses to let Abraham's descendants in. And what is funny, and this is stuff that I've written here in my notes, so if I go over it again, it's just refreshing you. I will also tell you about the tribes in the Bible, the lost tribes, and where God says they are. And isn't it funny, back to what I was saying, that the current day Israeli government will only they're only calling for these Ashkenazim and these white Eastern non-Semitic Jews to come into Israel. But the ministry of Jonathan Bernis has been going all across the planet, and he ended up in places like northern China, India, and he ended up in Nigeria and Kenya and Ethiopia. And he's one of the main reasons why about 100,000 plus Ethiopian Levites, because that's what they are, because they're Moses and Aaron's descendants, were let in because they did DNA testing, and they are in fact Jews. You have, let's see, I put back here in my notes, and I'm going to scroll through my notes here real quick. Let's see, Jonathan Bernis has found descendants of Abraham in Kenya and Nigeria. The only ones allowed in is, Ethiopia. But not the other two seeds of Abraham, which, when you understand, they are a remnant. And I believe that remnant was prepared in the time of Jethro or Reu, the high priest of Midian, and Moses, and through his bloodline. And it was a remnant that did not get taken captive. What Jonathan Bernis found when he was in Ethiopia, Nigeria, and Kenya, he found ephods. He found what looked like a lot of ephods. And so when you look in the Bible, there is the prophet Elijah, and he headed the school of the prophets. So whether you were a scribe, which the Ashkenazims and Khazars called them Masoretes, the writers, or whether you were a priest, because if you go back to when Samuel was offered up from Hannah unto the Lord, and Samuel at 3 went into the temple, and he studied under and learnt from Eli, who was the corrupt priest at that time. You will see why when Jonathan Bernis went, and he went into Ethiopia, Nigeria, and Kenya, he found a lot of ephods. Ephod was a breastplate, and it had the 12 jewels of each tribe, or gems of each tribe, in the breastplate. And he found what looked like a lot of the preparation tools, a lot of the what is it, Holy Spirit, I'm trying to say, a lot of the priestlyhood tools and chalices, plates, the preparation part of it. He found a lot of that you would have found in the tent, when the Holy of Holies tent, when Moses was alive and Aaron was alive, that they were required to get together the priestly garments, the ephod, the plates, the chalices, the wash bowls, all the things that the priest, the Levi priesthood, would use at the altar before the Lord in the Holy of Holies in the tent. And so this is what he found. And I believe that these were schools of preparation. And I believe that when you look at Jethro or Reu, the high priest of Midian, he was a high priest because there were people beneath him. And these people were learning the doctrines of Judaism, of the commandments, the laws, and the statutes that have been taught for thousands of years. And when Moses got the new commandments from the Lord, when he went up to Mount Sinai, those were also introduced as well unto Jethro. So my thing about the current Israeli government is, in part, is that they're breaking the law, the covenant of God. How is it that you are willing to let in the tribe of the tribes of Ishmael, the Hittites, which are the modern day Palestinians? How are you letting in a stranger and giving a heathen land, which God forbids you? God says that Petra, Jordan, where the dragons of the desert roam, you can find that in the book of Malachi, and I believe in the book of Amos, and he talks about that is their portion. The dragons of the desert are the snakes. Petra, the drymost places, that is what their their birthright is. They do not, because Esau despised his birthright, which is what I'm going to get into here. I have some lost books of the Bible. Jasher, the book of Jasher talks about Nimrod and what happened to Nimrod and why Esau sold his birthright. And so my thing is Esau sold his birthright. So the custom is that we're supposed to invite in a stranger. But the thing about it is just like when the children of Israel came out and there were the foreigners amongst them, God said they must be consecrated in the way of the Israelites, in the way of the Judaism, in the way of his laws, and abide in that and be circumcised. So basically the current day government is in error because, okay, they're giving land to uncircumcised, and they may some of them be circumcised heathens who are of Ishmael, instead of doing what the Lord says, because the seed of Abraham is the seed of Abraham, and that is who they're supposed to let in, because the Lord said, he told Abraham that his descendants would number that of the stars beyond measure and that of the sands. And so some people say, okay, his wife Keturah. So in Genesis chapter 25 verses 1 through 2, it says that Abraham married Keturah, and Keturah was a Canaanite woman. Now, because people ask questions like, so how did the races get here? How did all these nations get here? Because, again, the Bible, you have these so-called Christian Bible scholars, and they say they know the Bible, but notice none of them ever talk about Keturah. None of them never talk about Genesis 25. None of them never talk about Abraham's sons. It says that he gave them gifts and sent them away. And so I wanted to read to you out of the book of Jasher, and I wanted you to help you understand. I want you not only to understand that Moses, when he fled, he went all the way down, I said, into Saudi Arabia. Then he ended up in Ethiopia, where he met Jethro and he married Zipporah. And one of Solomon's descendants is from this line. And what you'll find in the pattern of what I'm reading is that God always comes back. Even though Zipporah was not a full-blooded Israelite, she was a non-Semitic Jew, just like the Edomites had Jewish blood, but they were non-Semitic because Esau married despicable women. It says in the Bible, Isaac and Rebekah despised Esau's wives because they were not Jews. And this is what was going on with Miriam and Aaron. It wasn't because of color, because they were dark-skinned people. So from the book of Jasher, chapter 25, just the notes I took, Abraham takes Keturah, has 6 sons. Now here are the names of those 6 sons: Zimran, Joksan, Midian, Ishbag, Shuag. Keturah was a Canaanite. So here are the children that were born from the descendants of these 6 sons. The children of Zimran were Abihan, Molech, Narim. So there is the god Baal-Melech, which would have put Molech, the son of Zimran, right around about the time, and wherever he settled was wherever, there's Baal-Melech, and then there's Baal-Peor, then there's the god Molech. Isn't it interesting that his name, and I need to do studying, that I believe that Molech, the god of Molech, which is similar to Melech, came from Molech, the son of Zimran. It was common for them to spread out, and they went their respective paths as Abraham sent them out away from Ishmael and sent them out away from Isaac, it says in Genesis chapter 25. So we also have the children of Joksan, Sheba, Dedan. We know that Solomon, the queen of Sheba, and you'll be surprised as to where Sheba is. Sheba is actually Ethiopia. So we go from Midian to Sheba, and then we go to the queen of Sheba, which Solomon slept with her and had descendants from her. Again, the queen of Sheba would have Midian blood, and Jethro and Zipporah were Ethiopians. They were from Midian. So again, the bloodline goes right back to that non-Semitic Judaism, that Jewish blood. Even though they were not intermarrying within the tribes of the 12 lost tribes, God still brought it right back. So we have Sheba, the civilization of Sheba, which was located, well, actually, it says it's actually around a country. It's in Ethiopia, somewhat in northern Ethiopia, but it's also in Eritrea. And Eritrea is right there, right above, and it spreads, Sheba spreads right up into Eritrea, and then there's another country right there. So all the way down from that country, Eritrea, into Ethiopia, that is where the Queen of Sheba, and in fact, I believe it was one of Solomon's descendants ruled in, what was it, the 1950s, 60s. He was the 237th descendant of Solomon, and his mother was the queen of Sheba. He took over Ethiopia, and then they ended up shooting him, digging his grave where his desk was, and the militants took over Ethiopia. So that's what happened to him. So we have the children of, like I said, Jacques' sons, Sheba and Dedan. The children of Midian, which would be around Iraq, is Amida, and then we read about Joab, and we know about the prayer of Joab. Gochi was another of the descendants of Midian, Elisha, and Naktak. Okay. The children of Midian, which is the Ethiopians, the names of the descendants of Midian is Ephod, Apher, Chenak, Abidiah, and Eldaha. Okay. Chenak would be Reuel or Jethro. Those were his names, the high priest of Midian. Then we have the children of Ishbak. We have Makiro, Boyugaba, and Tatur. The children of Shuag are Biladad, Mandad, Munan, and Maiban. So, you get an understanding of what is going on here. This is how the world was populated. This is how mainstream America, mainstream Christianity, and anybody who wants to, twist the word of God, they leave out these books such as Jasser. They misread the book of Genesis chapter 7 when it comes to Noah's Ark, and it said 7 of every living thing. That's what it said, and 2 of every unclean thing. You have, Genesis 25. It's telling you about Abraham's wife, KETURAH, and that he took this woman. One of the things that you need to understand, and when I'm going to get to Nimrod here in a minute, in the book of Jasher, is that the 12 tribes, when you understand Jacob, Leah and Rachel's concubines, one was her name was Belial. The other one, I can't think of her name. They were Egyptian. When Jacob slept with Leah and Rachel's handmaids, their servants, their midwives, they were Egyptian. So Zebulun, Naphtali, came from these women. Okay, those are very Egyptian names. Zebulun, Nephtali. You get that this is so these are mixed race people. So why would not the current government of Israel, knowing that they have been DNA tested, let the true Israelites in? I still got to read to you guys where these places are that they're coming from. So when Esau sold his birthright, it gives us understanding in the book of Jasher why he did. And I had told you in the other video that Nimrod was cut off in the 7th generation, but he was cut off because the Lord was displeased with him. And so Jasher 27 talks about Nimrod was jealous of Esau all the days, and he would watch and try to compete with Esau. Nimrod was obviously, the Tower of Babel of Babylon, and that's where that was located. And we know about Nimrod. So this is just a little bit of the notes that I wrote about Nimrod. Jasher 27. Esau slays Nimrod, son of Cush. Now, understand, I'm gonna stop right there. The Illuminati, it's so interesting the way that they hate black people and try to oppress black people, but the Tower of Babel and their pyramid and their connection to Tammuz and Nimrod and the spirit of Baal Melech, Baal Peor that they worship so adamantly. Cushites are black. Nimrod is black, but they try to make him white because it's, ignorance is really bliss for these people. They intentionally, bliss is their thing because they want to ignore what is true, and they know that the Lord is sovereign and that he's the true Lord of heaven and earth, and he even created Lucifer, their God. So back to Jasher 27. Let me start over. Esau slays Nimrod, son of Cush. Nimrod lived for 215 years. For 185 years he reigned, and he was king. The seed of Abraham had killed him, as Nimrod had seen over and over in his dreams. Let me look around here and see what else I got in my notes. Okay. So upon Esau killing, and I'm going to go as to what I read. So upon Esau slaying Nimrod, Nimrod would walk the fields and get exercise and fresh air. And it would be in the same proximity that Esau would also be hunting and doing his thing and living in the land. And Nimrod that day in the book of Jasher 27 was with two men. And they were two young men. And the two men left away from him. And Esau that day was out hunting, and they were gathering and collecting, and he was with this tribe. And so the moment that he saw Nimrod by himself, he got into a scuffle. Now keep in mind, Nimrod was said to be at least 9 foot tall. He was a giant. He had Nephilim blood in him, and that's why God despised him. And he was coinciding with the Nephilim, the giants on the Tower of Babel. So Nimrod and Esau got into it, and he had quite a fight that day, and he slayed Nimrod in the field, and he took his clothes, and before he could flee, and because his clothes were fine silks, expensive linens, and he could sell them for a profit. And so the two young men that Nimrod was walking with that day in the field in the book of Jasher got into a sword fight with Esau. Esau overcame them and slayed them. He went into town, sold the clothes, went back, and he went back to the tent where Jacob was, and he was sulking, and he felt unnerved, and then he began to talk to Jacob, And then that's when he sold his birthright for a bowl of lentil soup. And after he had killed Nimrod, and that is when Jacob, it says in the book of Jasher, received the birthright of Esau. Let's see. Several other notes. Let's see. Wanted to get that out about Nimrod and Esau. So either way, it's funny. You know, Esau profaned God and offended God. And he despised Esau, is what the word of God says in the book of Malachi. But Jacob he loved. Nimrod, God despised, and he ended up dying. So this is what happened that day. Nimrod ends up getting killed after he had all these dreams, and Esau goes back because God despised him and the foreign women, and he despised his birthright, and he ends up selling it to Jacob. Isn't this very interesting? Now we're going to go back to Abraham and Midian. If you go back and you look at the Bible, it says in Genesis chapter 25, it says Midian left Abraham and went east of Cush to dwell there. Jasher 25. So Cush is Central Africa, parts of Northern Africa, Sudan, those areas, and it tells you that he went east. And what is east of Kenya? Nigeria, Sudan. You go down and you go down eastward, and right there is where Midian, where Ethiopia, you know, is. So let's see. We covered Dieter. So let's see, right here. Let's go right back here, and we're going to continue to talk about the descendants of Abraham. Now, some of the things that you need to understand is where the color scheme comes from. And, you know, what my understanding and what I believe is when, you know, KETURAH and when Rachel, Belial, and the other servant, and I said Rachel, Leah, and Belial, and the other servant, when they laid with Jacob, what came out were very distinctive, very unique 12 individuals of these lost tribes. None of them looked alike. None of them had the same hair color. None of them had the same eye color, skin color. They were dark-skinned people. In fact, you know, this again is something that is said. When you look at King David, it says that, you know, when he was described by Samuel, he was described as being short, handsome, and ruddy. The word ruddy means dark-complected, dark-skinned. It says in the Songs of Solomon that Solomon's hair was black, dark, and wavy, like a raven. When you look at Gehazi, and I had said that there are white Jews, and this is going back to when I'm getting ready to read about the lost tribes. When you go in and you read about Gehazi in 2 Kings chapter 5, and when you read about him, Naaman the Syrian soldier had leprosy, and his servant at that time, they were Israelite women. He went down, Elijah told him to dip in the river Jordan 7 times. He did, and he was cured. Upon that, he offered Elijah gifts, and he came bearing gifts, shekels of gold and silver and fine linens, expensive at that time. Elijah said no, but his servant, being greedy and being a very selfish individual, Gehazi, decides to go and chase after the Syrian soldier. And he asked him, he took 2 sets of clothing, linen, and some shekels of gold and silver. He came back, and the Spirit of the Lord was heavy on Elijah. And Elijah asked Gehazi, he had said to him, where have you been, servant? And he told him nothing. And Elijah said, was not your master with you when the man got off the chariot? He gave you the clothing and the shekels of silver and gold. Was I not? And he told him, Gehazi was shocked. And because Gehazi had did this sin and erred, it says, and Elijah cursed him in 2 Kings chapter 5. He cursed him with Naaman's leprosy. And he told him that his descendants would be as white as snow forever. Now, there are white Jews, but these Jews would have, Cushite features, or they would have some of the other darker skinned features, but they would look white. There are also non-Semitic Jews, which are Edomites, because you have all the 6 sons which have non-Semitic blood in them, which Abraham had with Keturah. So there are white Jews, but they are the white Jews from Gehazi's bloodline. And so what I want to make clear about Gehazi, if the Jews are white, then why was Gehazi turned as white as snow? Telling you right there that he was a colored man, just like Joseph and Mary when the Lord told them to get up and flee because the Roman rulers wanted their heads and wanted to do away with Yeshua the Christ. They went into Egypt. Now, if they were white people walking around in Egypt, don't you maybe think that they would have gotten caught? Okay, this takes some common sense here. It is what I said. You have, the American whites and the Europeans that try to, the Ashkenazim and the Khazars, they try to equate the Egyptians as being white. And, if you ask a real Egyptian that lives in Egypt, they will tell you that they were black people or they were dark complected and they were not white people. You see, that's what I mean. You got to go ask the source, and you got to understand the source. These were colored people. The Egyptians were clearly colored people. The pharaohs were clearly colored people. And when you look at them, like when you look at them in the paintings, and they write about henna. Henna is used to turn the skin red. It's used to make the hair shades of blondish orange, or red in some cases, and in some cases green. But it was more in Africa, the Berber people, which have which look like white people. They come from dark complected with white Caucasian features to looking like white people, and they have straighter melodic type looking hair. And they were around Ethiopia, up into Eritrea, all the way up into North Africa. And they have the blue-eyed, green-eyed gene, the Berber people. And they use henna a lot of times in their hair, which turns it red, reddish orange, or blonde. A lot of times the Berber people are also born with a lighter colored hair. So, again, the whole color scheme here, and what I believe that each one of the tribes came out looking a different color. And simply put, the lost tribes let's see, let's go here and let's read here. I'm just talking now. So here are the tribes, and clearly in Isaiah chapter 11 verse 11, it says, "It shall come to pass in that day that the Lord shall set his hand again the second time to recover the remnant of his people who are left from Assyria and Egypt, from Pathros, which is Greece, and Cush, from Elam, which is Iran, and Shinar, which is between Iraq and Iran, which is Babylon, and from Hamathah, which is located which is located in northern Syria, um, and from the islands of the sea, and Midian, which is Ethiopia. So understand, when the tribes were taken into captivity, 10 were taken, some into Mesopotamia, others into Babylon. Others were sold and distributed amongst other nations. When you look at old, and they try to hide history from Mesopotamia and from, Babylonia, there are pictures that were painted thousands of years ago, by, the people in those regions. And they were pictures depicting the relationship between Mesopotamians and the lost tribes, and Babylonia and the descendants of Israel. And what you see in these pictures is they are paintings that depict the image of what the Israelites look like. And when the writing is deciphered at the bottom of the picture, because every civilization tells a story through paintings, drawings, and writing. And so what you see is, it says at the bottom of one from Babylon, you see what looks like, the Iraqians and the Iranians, the straight hair, and the features in this, and this was from thousands of years ago, and it's the taskmaster telling the tribe, the one or several of the lost tribes, what to do. And you see images of black men in chains, and it says these are Israelites doing their work for the taskmaster. Okay, something like that. I'm paraphrasing. But what you see is these little knots on their head that look like naps. Okay, it says right in these pictures that these are Israelites, and they were Cushites. They were black. When you look at the ones from Assyria, Mesopotamia, the same thing. You see the taskmaster, which is the Syrians, and they have the straight hair. They look like Assad. They look like, there are dark-skinned Syrians, light-skinned Syrians. They look like that with the hair. But what you see is, you see the Israelite in chains, and they're dark complected. Okay, what's wrong with this picture? And this is when they were taken. 2 tribes were left in Israel when the 10 were taken. One of those was the tribe of Judah. The other one, it skipped my mind right now. So, let's see. What I believe, what the Lord is sharing with me, and then let's see, I'm going to make sure we covered Solomon, I think that, the root of David, and this is, thank you, God, the root of David, and then the portion of the 12 tribes. So I'm going to put my hand right here. I believe that in these last days that the scepter of David will return back to the hands of Judah. God made a promise even after Jeroboam, Solomon's sons were evil before the sight of the Lord. He made a promise that the scepter would return, not just with Yeshua the Christ, because he's coming to rule and reign for 1,000 years because he is the son of David, but there is a root that is going to come up and out, and I believe out of Judah, and I believe that this root will somehow take hold of where Netanyahu is and these fake white Ashkenazim, and that is where the beginning of all the tribes, all the lost tribes they're talking about in the book of Revelation. You see these so-called, the Ashkenazim and the Khazars that are running Israel right now, 75% of them, because tests were ran on them, are not Jews. Only about 35% of them have real Jewish blood in them. Those white Ashkenazim are non-Semitic. And so they don't fulfill the prophecy. Again, a lot of those Ashkenazim will say, well, we're from the tribe of Ephraim. No, you're not, because again, you're trying to equate the Ethiopians from the tribe of Dan because of Haram. Haram was a colored man because the tribe of Dan were colored. I said in my video before, I said that, the Kabbalist priests that are in Israel right now, who are in the temples and the courts, they will not ever identify the Ethiopians as Levites, because they've stolen not only a priesthood for the temple of Satan, but they've also stolen a birthright that rightfully belongs to colored people. Okay, and just what I told you, where all the people, the islands of the sea, this is where God is going to collect the islands, because they were taken into captivity. They are colored people. They are colored people with straight hair, nappy hair, the true Israelites. It does not matter. And they will not divulge this information, the current regime in Israel. But they are in error because it does not fulfill Bible prophecy. Ephraim was colored. I'm from the tribe of Manasseh. That was his brother. We both have Egyptian blood, and that is why they claim it, because they say they are white. No. Ephraim is not white. Manasseh is not white. Joseph was not white. They call him in Egypt Imhotep. That was his Egyptian name. And there are stories and statues about what Joseph did and how he saved the land, and about how his people came and his father and his brothers came, and how God used him. And they talk about God, but again, it's been erased. History's been twisted by, the Zionists, the Illuminati. So one of the things, this root of David that is going to spring forth and is going to take the scepter, and the scepter of David is going to be replaced and put back into the rightful heirs of Israel. The 12 tribes and how it goes is in the book of Exodus and, Leviticus, when they overtook the heathens in the land, and God told them to go in, and he actually X that slash that after, that's right, that was right, excuse me, after the 40 years, after they were in the desert, and in the book of Exodus and the book of Leviticus, and when the land is being divided, the thing is that each tribe is supposed to receive a homeland. The main state capitals of Israel are supposed to be Judea and Jerusalem, because of King David, because of King David, because of the promise. Those are supposed to be the two main staples, Jerusalem and Judea. Judea is connected to Christ. Judea is connected to King David. All the round surrounding those two cities, each one of the children of Israel, minus the Levites, are to receive their God-given birthright. That means Ashdod, Ashkelon, the West Bank, Gaza, all of that is supposed to go to the 11 tribes, minus the Levites, because what it is with the Levites is they didn't get a homeland, but they were given land, and they are to be given offerings and a portion of land, and a portion of whatever God gives the other tribes, because they are a priestly tribe, and they are to receive because they get all the offerings, they do all the burnt offerings, they did all the sacrifices, all the prayers to the Lord. So a part of that comes to the Levites, and then a portion of that goes to the Lord, and they are in charge of that. And you have these modern day Ashkenazim Khazars that are trying to fulfill Bible prophecy, but what they're doing is they're trying to divide the land amongst heathens, and God has forbidden them to do that. He told them to give away their birthright. And these cabal priests that are up in the temple court now that are disguising themselves are not rabbis. They are a part of the Illuminati, the Zionists, and they worship Shekinah, the root pillar of Kabbalism. And so it angers the Lord, and they should throw these people out. I believe that Ethiopia, Nigeria, and Kenya are where Levites are. I believe that they are the remnant that God has sanctified, and he needs to establish a priesthood. Look, when Moses led the children of Israel out, what was the first thing that he did? He established Moses as a priest. Okay? When, God was establishing the church, what was the first thing he did? He established Christ, and Christ was the chief cornerstone. Then the other pillars were the apostles, the prophets. Okay? This is no different than with Elijah. The pillar, the school of the prophets. He always has a foundation. It always goes back to the prophets, and it always goes back to the priesthood. This is the way God sets up his civilization, because this is setting up the law and the order and the commandments and the foundation of what God requires of his people. And when you get rid of that, you have disorder, you have chaos, and then you have the curse and the judgments of God. So let me go here and let me look through here again real quick. And I think that we pretty much got everything. If you have any questions, please leave something in the box. I do not argue with people. This is Electric Elohim's page. Shalom, and thank you for listening.